Hi, this is Bruce Whipple, and welcome to the Business Acquisition Podcast. This is where we talk about how to acquire an already profitable business rather than build one from scratch. In the past 25 years, I've acquired several businesses, and I've also built several businesses from scratch. And I can tell you that it's a lot easier to do the former rather than the latter. You may know me from my association with Dan Peña, who I've worked with and been partners with for more than 25 years. Dan is gracious enough to mention me quite often in his videos, and it's been a real pleasure working with Dan, and one of the few people that I call a true friend. And actually, we've worked on many acquisitions together as well. And even though I said it was easier to acquire a business rather than build one from scratch, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. I often say that QLA is simple, but please don't make the mistake of thinking that simple is the same thing as easy. It still requires hard work. I get asked a lot about what are the traits of successful people, and that's a great question as to what do people who are successful do that other people don't do. Certainly there's some luck involved in whether you're successful or not, but there's a lot beyond luck. And so I wanted to spend a couple of minutes, because I've been asked that question a lot this week, to at least give you my thoughts on that. Of course, you need a good work ethic. I'm not a believer in the 4-hour work week. I mean, I guess you could have lightning in a bottle and make that work on occasion, but I have never seen too many successful people that actually have done that. And you have to work smart. You can work 115 hours a week, but if what you're doing is a plan that won't work, it's a total waste of your time, no matter how many hours you work. And I always use the analogy, you don't want to be the fly trying to get through the window, where you can do that until the end of time, and ultimately you are going to be a dead fly laying on the sill by the window. So that is obviously not what we are trying to accomplish here. So what do I see as those qualities? And maybe the best way to talk about that is to think back to when I was first hiring people and the lessons I learned in doing that. And one of the first ones that I looked for was dependability. Did they show up on time? The HR people used to go crazy, because if a person literally showed up a minute late for the interview, I said I didn't need to see him. That is the honeymoon period. It never gets as good as it is right now. The HR guys would say, well, they got caught in traffic, or they got lost on the way over. I always commented to that. They should have left earlier, number one. And number two, if they got lost, they flew in the previous night most of the time. They were just going to stay in a hotel room. Why didn't they drive it to find out that they knew how to get there? So that was my number one test first, dependability. Unless somebody is dependable, I didn't care how good they were, how talented they were. The second was a sense of urgency. It's amazing how many people don't take action and don't follow the slogan that I keep on my desk to remind me to do it, and that is to do it now. A lot of people get hung up in analysis paralysis and don't end up taking action, thinking that, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll think about it tomorrow. I need more information. Most of the time, that is all rooted in fear. And as Dan Peña has said to me more than once, fear is false expectations appearing real. Certainly that is true based on my experience. And a lot of times they don't think what they just need to do. They tend to overthink it. Well, what happens if this goes wrong? And what happens if that goes wrong? Well, you know what? What happens if it doesn't go wrong? You end up spending an awful lot of time thinking about scenarios that won't end up happening in all likelihood. Now, if you are SEAL Team 6 going in to get Osama bin Laden, they ended up thinking about every contingency that they would see and having a solution for it. And that's a different situation. Just to finish that thought, one of the people at the very end said, well, what if one of the helicopters goes down? Then what do we do? And actually that happened. So if you are doing that level of work, I absolutely understand looking at contingencies. If you're a doctor doing brain surgery, you certainly want to. But most of the time, the decisions we're making do not fall into that category. So what you do is you assess the situation, you get some input from your team, you ultimately make a decision, and then you press on. And you end up learning either from the failures and what to do right the next time, or it works out. And I'll give you an example which has nothing to do with business other than maybe the way it relates. And that is, over the weekend, I saw a advertisement come through for some shoes that I have purchased in the past. I've got some pretty large feet at size 15, so a lot of times it's tough to find that size. But they had a sale. They had a sale on size 15s, which was included in that. I said, I want to end up getting these shoes. So I said, I'll go ahead and do it tomorrow. So tomorrow came. I went back on the website, all ready to buy them. Guess what? They weren't there anymore. So had I taken action at that time, I would have ended up with the shoes. I waited a day, didn't end up. So how does that relate to you? I think the same is true with opportunities. Opportunities can be very, very fleeting. So if there's an opportunity, if you know in your gut, which is a really good test to do, most of the time if you trust your gut, you will get better and better at making those decisions and taking action with that. Most of the time, you'll be on the right side of it, and you'll get more confident in making quick decisions. Now, there are no shortcuts when you talk about QLA. You have to follow the steps and go through it. And one of my favorite, if not my favorite quotation, was by Calvin Coolidge, who was the 30th president of the United States. He lived between 1872 and 1933, a long time ago. But his quote was this: "Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated failures. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent." Calvin Coolidge. And I think what I always look to that quote to reinforce to me is, you are not going to hit a grand slam and be successful in everything you do. You will have failures. Anyone who has accomplished things basically fails their way to success. The real difference is whether you let that failure dictate what's going to happen to you, or if you assess it, learn what you did wrong, what you could do better, and then get back in the game. That's certainly what I've seen is one of the big qualities in people that succeed is they don't take temporary defeat as failure. They just look at it as temporary defeat. What can I learn from it? And they move forward. And I had a call with Ray this morning. He is a mentee. He is doing a roll-up, and it was interesting. He's grown tremendously in confidence as we've worked together, and that's due to the hard work and what he's done. But his team told him, you will not get accountants and lawyers on success-oriented fees. Particularly, accounting firms will not do that because they've got accounting rules. They can't take those as a violation of GAAP. Actually, they can take deferred fees, but success-oriented fees is a term that they don't like. Even one of his board members, who's a retired KPMG partner, said, I don't think you're going to get any big accounting firm to do this. It's just very, very unlikely that you'll be successful. So he ended up kissing a lot of frogs, talking to a lot of accounting firms. He ended up practicing on some of the smaller ones first. And today, when we had our meeting, he told me that PwC had accepted success-oriented deferred fees, or if you, better way to say it is rolled fees. Doesn't mean you're not going to pay him. What it means is you're going to roll unsuccessful transactions to the next successful transaction, or, depending on the size, the series of transactions. So that is no small accomplishment to get them to agree. And go back to what people told him, you're not going to be successful, you're not going to get it done. Guess what? He kissed a lot of frogs. He continued on. And one of the things I loved best about a story that he included when he was telling me about that was he met with an accounting firm. And I'm not going to mention the accounting firm, but here's what he commented to me on. He said, it felt surreal that there were two people and one on a conference call. So he had three people from the other side. It was him alone making a presentation to me. I don't have millions, for Christ's sake, but I held and stayed calm on the surface. And what he said was he felt like the duck whose legs are going 1,000,000 miles an hour underneath the water, but he looks calm on the surface. And he said that he exuded confidence, but inside he was very, very nervous. And you're going to do a lot of things that make you uncomfortable if you choose to go down the path of QLA. And the only advice I can give you with respect to that is you'll get more comfortable being uncomfortable. But what did he do? One of the things he did was he ended up doing something that Dan Peña said to me early on and is one of his credos for success, and that is that successful people act as if they have no limits on their abilities. Doesn't mean they don't have a team around them, but it does mean that they act with a high degree of confidence, and that generates people wanting to, one, be around you, have belief that you'll be successful in what you're doing, and that your plan will work, as opposed to, well, this could go wrong and that could go wrong. And, I think we might end up with this, but I'm not sure it's going to work. That is not going to serve any of us well. But he went in a suit. That made a massive difference for him. And he behaved as if he had no limits on his ability, which was probably the largest piece of that success. He had a good plan. He had prepared. He was well-versed in what he wanted to say. Those are, I think, what I would give is some advice on what do successful people do and what are their traits. The more you practice those, you'll get better at them. So those are the traits that I see in successful people: dependability, sense of urgency, acting as if they have no limitations on their ability. And if you can do that, your chances of success are much, much better. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future episodes, please email bruce@brucewhipple.com. And if you're not already on our mailing list, head over to brucewhipple.com and sign up and grab any of the free reports. That'll put you on the mailing list. There is a lot of free information you can use to acquire already profitable businesses. This is Bruce Whipple. Thanks for listening to the Business Acquisition Podcast. And remember, you miss 100% of the opportunities you failed to take. And procrastination truly is the thief of time. So do something today, please. Your future self will be proud of.